Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is the Jared Dillian Show. So, student loans have been in the news lately. They've really been in the news. Elizabeth Warren, not my favorite person in the world. Not my favorite person. By the way, this is off topic, but she claimed to be Native American and actually was the diversity hire at Harvard as a Native American. I actually am a very small part Native American. My great-great-grandmother was Native American, the Crow tribe, actually. Which makes me more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. I'm actually ahead of her in that department. I wouldn't think for a second, the thought would not even cross my mind. She had a cookbook. She had a Native American cookbook. It was called Pow Wow Chow. This is real. I mean, whatever you think about her policies or whatever, somebody who does something like this is totally unhinged. It's completely unhinged. So, not to mention it's very insulting to actual Native Americans. Anyway, Elizabeth Warren wants to cancel student loans. She tweeted about it a week or two ago, and she said that Biden should do it by executive order. And Chuck Schumer said this too. They both said this. They said that Biden should issue an executive order canceling up to $50,000 in student loan debt unilaterally for everybody. And Biden wisely sidestepped the issue, wisely, because this is the sort of stuff that radicalizes people. A lot of people feel very strongly about this. You know who feels very strongly about this? Is people who actually worked their ass off to pay their student loans. And this is a great way to turn people into Republicans. I'm serious. So Biden sidestepped the issue, and he says, well, if it's such a great idea, then Congress can pass it, which is absolutely true. I mean, even if it is within Biden's legal authority to cancel student loan debt, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, Congress should do it. If it's really that important, then Congress should pass it. Now, this Congress is not going to be able to pass it, even if the Senate is 50-50. Maybe it happens in 2022, but yeah, it's not a good idea. A lot of people are going to be very upset. If you borrow money to go to college, who do you borrow the money from? You borrow it from the government. You don't borrow it from a bank. Banks are out of the business. The government took over the student lending business in 2009. They've done a terrific job. They've made $1.6 trillion in student loans. They've done a terrific job, and all these people have gone to college. Arguably, people have gone to college that shouldn't have gone to college. You know the whole thing. I don't need to get into it here. In that time, student lending has more than doubled. So you don't owe money to the bank, you owe money to the government, which is worse. Because a bank, you can say, screw you to the bank, I'm not paying you, and then the bank has to eat it. You can't do that to the government. The government does not let you off the hook. You cannot discharge these loans in bankruptcy. So when I talk about which debt should you pay off first, and I talk about the difference between secured debt and unsecured debt and high interest debt and low interest debt, one of the loans that you should pay off first is student loans, because they're dangerous, because if you don't pay them off, they can follow you around forever. It's really, really bad. It's really bad. And people sign up for these things when they're 18 years old, when they have, you're going to borrow $100,000. You're like, okay, you really have no concept of how big of a number that is when you're 18 years old. So, and then you ask, why is the government charging me 8% interest? I mean, the government is not a for-profit enterprise. So if the government is really like a nonprofit, then why do they need to charge 8% interest? And the answer is it's because it's unsecured lending. You see, secured lending has lowered interest rates. Your car loan has a lower interest rates because they can repo the car. Your mortgage has a lower interest rates because they can foreclose on you. But with student loans, there's nothing to foreclose on. There's nothing. It's unsecured. And unsecured lending has higher interest rates. Arguably, given the credit risk of some of these borrowers, the interest rate should be even higher. The interest rate should be around credit card interest rates. So I actually think that even with 8% interest rates on student loans, there's subsidies. They're being subsidized. So, but like I said, that's the interest rate is not even the unfair part of the loan. The unfair part is that you cannot discharge the loan in bankruptcy. You go bankrupt and you still owe the student loans and they follow you around forever. You're 18 years old and you sign this piece of paper and you have $200,000 following you around for the rest of your life. Also, the thing with these student loans is if you don't pay the interest on a regular basis, the interest gets added to the principal. They used to have loans like this in the housing market back in the mid-2000s. They were called negative amortization loans, neg-am loans. And they got rid of them. They got rid of them because you can't, it just violates principles of fairness that you would take the interest and add it to the principal and the principal gets bigger over time. You've probably seen these memes on Facebook about how these people, they made student loan payments for 10 years and the balance got bigger, right? Like that's because they're not making the full interest payment. It's being added to the principal. This is very evil stuff. These are the most evil loans of all time, and this is why you should pay these things off first. So what are the consequences of canceling student loans, aside from a bunch of pissed off people? That's actually probably the bigger consequence. But the financial consequence is that this it all goes on the government balance sheet. Like it just gets added to the debt. So if we have $27 trillion in debt right now, it turns into $28.6 trillion. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound so bad. I mean, we spent $27 trillion on a bunch of other dumb stuff. I mean, this isn't as dumb as that. Like, actually, out of all the arguments to cancel student loans, like, that's actually not a bad one. You know, we've spent trillions of dollars in stimulus. You know, why not spend $1.6 trillion for giving student loans? Actually, not a terrible argument. We spend money on dumber stuff, right? But that's what happens. It's going to get added to the debts, which means we're either going to have to issue $1.6 trillion in bonds or we're going to have to raise $1.6 trillion in taxes or a little bit of both. And everybody says, well, rich people can pay for it. Yeah, the math actually doesn't work. The math doesn't work. If you took the top 1% of taxpayers and you raised taxes on them to 100%, do you know how much revenue you would raise? You would raise $800 billion. So you could tax rich people at 100%, take all their money, and you only get half the number for the student loans. I actually had a conversation about this with John Williams at WGN recently, and he's in favor of higher taxes, and he was saying, well, you know, when is somebody going to raise taxes to bring down this deficit? And I'm like, I said, John, it's not a tax problem. It's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. I'm like, you could raise taxes on everybody in the entire country to 100%. You could tax everybody in the entire country at 100%, and it barely covers the deficit. We do not have a revenue problem. We collect enough revenue. It's a spending problem, and student loans are a part of it. You know, when Elizabeth Warren said that she's not raising taxes on the middle class to pay for her healthcare program, which she put the price tag on it at $52 trillion. I mean, that's what got her bounced out of the race, because even the most mathematically illiterate people said that is absurd. Okay. And if you cancel student loans, everyone's taxes have to go up, not just rich people. Everyone's taxes have to go up. So, I mean, we'll talk about taxes for a little bit if you want to talk about taxes. I'm not a fan of the tax system in this country. I don't think it's fair because we have the most progressive taxes in the world. And what I mean that is the amount that higher income people pay relative to lower income people. You know, the bottom, you know, Mitt Romney said this in 2012. It was 2012. You know, about the bottom 50% of taxpayers basically have no tax liability. In most countries in the world, pretty much all countries, that's unheard of. Sweden. You know, everybody wants to be Sweden. Sweden is so great. In Sweden, the bottom tax rate, which kicks in at about $10,000, is 35%. Even the poorest people in Sweden pay 35% income taxes, which is about the same as what the top rate is in the United States. So I don't think people really want Sweden's tax system. I really don't. Oh man. Anyway, the point is that the taxes on middle class could potentially go up a lot. And that's where the money is, and that's where the money that would have to be raised. And actually, before the show, I saw something on Twitter about Biden. And Biden seems to be backtracking on taxes a little bit. He said that he wants to raise taxes back to where they were under George W. Bush. Now, in George W. Bush's first term, taxes were at 39.6%. So that isn't what he said during his campaign. In his campaign, he said he wanted to impose payroll taxes on people making more than $400,000 a year, which would in some cases raise the top tax rate to 53%. That's not what he's saying now. Now he's just saying he wants to raise them to 39.6%. I mean, yeah, like if you want to dice mouse turds here, like sure, you know, if you have to raise taxes and you're going to raise them to where they were under Bush, that sounds pretty good to me. So anyway, here's the problem when you cancel a debt. It's a liability for someone. Someone has to pay, but it's an asset for someone else. It's an asset for the government, and the government is basically all of us. The government is taxpayers. So we're shifting the cost of college onto people who aren't going to college. I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.